Welcome back to the Short Game Podcast. It is Monday, March 9th. We are kicking off the Sovereign Week. You are sitting there right now wondering why you keep getting passed over in life. You think if you just put your head down, work hard, and act like a nice guy, someone is eventually going to hand you a promotion, a deal, or a win. Let me give you the hardest truth about human nature. Nobody owes you anything, and nobody cares how nice you are. If you want someone to open a door for you, you have to create a scenario where it is in their absolute best interest to open it. You have to deal in reality, not hope. Today, we are reading The Ultimate Manual for Leverage, The Prince, by Niccolò Machiavelli. I'm Drew Meitner. When I want a high-level CEO to take a meeting with NexYear, I do not beg for their time. I deploy a physical asset that aligns with their incentives and forces the conversation to happen. A sovereign does not ask for favors. Let's get into it.
What's your name?
My name is Tom Shelby.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius.
King Ragnar. That is my name.
Yo soy Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria.
I'm Batman.
This is Jon Snow. He's king in the north.
My name is Asax Schrader.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
Antonio Montana.
My name is Patrick Payne.
My name is Walter Hartwell White.
My name is Gustavo, but you can call me Gus.
I am your host, Drew Meitner, and today we are talking about the reality of leverage. You are probably listening to this right now because you are incredibly frustrated. You just got passed over for a promotion, you lost a massive deal, or some opportunity you thought was rightfully yours got handed to somebody else. And what are you doing about it right now? You are sitting at a bar with your buddies, complaining that the world just isn't fair, that your boss doesn't see your true value, and that you are a nice guy who just works hard. Let me hit you with the absolute brutal truth right out of the gate. Nobody owes you anything in this life. Thinking that just working hard, keeping your head down, and being a nice guy will magically get you what you want is a complete clown mentality. You are failing because you expect the world to operate on favors, fairness, and niceness. The world does not care about your feelings, it does not care about your effort, and it certainly does not care how nice you are to people. If you want to win, whether you are an employee, a student, an athlete, or a founder, you have to stop asking the world for permission. You have to build actual undeniable leverage. Today, I am giving you the exact blueprint for how the real world actually works, not the fairy tale they sold you in school. We are diving deep into a book that permanently separates the kings from the peasants, and it is called The Prince by Niccolò Machiavelli. Machiavelli wrote this masterpiece over 500 years ago, but it remains the most unfiltered, accurate playbook for human behavior ever put on paper. His core thesis completely shatters the utopian nonsense that most people use to cope with their own incompetence. He argues that a ruler must deal with the brutal reality of human nature, not some imaginary ideal of how people ought to act. Listen to this line directly from the text, because it is the entire foundation of reality. Machiavelli says that how one lives is so far distant from how one ought to live, that he who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation. If you are operating your life or your business based on how you think people should behave, you are actively destroying yourself. He explicitly warns that a man who wishes to act entirely up to his professions of virtue soon meets with what destroys him among so much that is evil. Relying on the charity, the goodwill, or the niceness of others is a guaranteed way to lose everything you have. A true sovereign builds his life based on leverage and aligning incentives, not hoping people suddenly decide to be generous. Let us look at his most famous question, which gets right to the absolute heart of this concept. Machiavelli asks whether it is better to be loved than feared, or feared than loved. Most weak, naive people desperately want to be loved. They want everyone to like them. They want to be popular in the office, and they think being a crowd pleaser is an actual strategy. But Machiavelli drops a massive reality check on human nature. He says it is much safer to be feared than loved, when, of the two, either must be dispensed with. And he explains exactly why this is the case. He writes that men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous, and as long as you succeed, they are yours entirely. They will offer you their blood, property, life, and children when the need is far distant, but when it approaches, they turn against you. Think about your own life for a second. When things are going great and you are winning, everyone is your best friend. But the second you actually need a favor, the second you are down and out, watch exactly how fast they scatter. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago, and nothing has changed. He says that friendships obtained by payments, and not by greatness or nobility of mind, may indeed be earned, but they are not secured, and in time of need cannot be relied upon. Love is preserved by a link of obligation, which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken at every opportunity for their advantage. But fear preserves you by a dread of punishment, which never fails. Now, do not get this twisted into some comic book villain nonsense. Being feared does not mean being a psychotic, screaming tyrant. It means people deeply respect the professional and personal consequences of crossing you. It means you have engineered a situation where it costs them something massive to say no to you. Machiavelli makes it very clear that you should inspire fear, in such a way that if you do not win love, you avoid hatred. He says you avoid being hated as long as you abstain from the property of your citizens and subjects and from their women. You deal in respect and operational leverage, not petty cruelty. True power comes from engineering situations where people are mathematically incentivized to help you for their own benefit. Let us talk about the concept of the fox and the lion, because this is pure operator mentality. Machiavelli says there are two ways of contesting, the one by the law, the other by force. The first method is proper to men, the second to beasts. But because playing by the rules is frequently not sufficient to get the job done, it is necessary to have recourse to the second. You absolutely have to understand how to use both natures. He says you must be a fox to discover the snares and a lion to terrify the wolves. Those who rely simply on the lion, just using brute force and mindless anger, do not understand what they are about. You need the sheer, undeniable leverage of the lion combined with the strategic, calculated alignment of the fox. You have to set up the board so that the other person's only logical move is the one that directly benefits you. Machiavelli takes this even further when he discusses keeping your word in business and politics. He says a wise lord cannot, nor ought he to, keep faith when such observance may be turned against him, and when the reasons that caused him to pledge it exist no longer. He points out that if men were entirely good, this precept would not hold, but because they are bad and will not keep faith with you, you too are not bound to observe it with them. This is about operating in objective reality. It is about realizing that your competitors, the people trying to take your spot, are not playing by the utopian rulebook. If you cling to utopian ideals, you will be outmaneuvered by someone who truly understands leverage. Let us look at what Machiavelli says about armed versus unarmed prophets. This applies perfectly to anyone trying to pitch an idea, get a massive raise, or start a movement. He writes that all armed prophets have conquered, and the unarmed ones have been destroyed. Why does this always happen? Because the nature of the people is variable, and whilst it is easy to persuade them, it is incredibly difficult to fix them in that persuasion. Thus, it is necessary to take such measures that, when they believe no longer, it may be possible to make them believe by force. In our modern world, force does not mean physical violence. Force means undeniable, systematic leverage that cannot be ignored. If you are an unarmed prophet, meaning you have a great idea but zero leverage, zero capital, and zero irrefutable skills, you are going to lose. Machiavelli also absolutely destroys the idea of relying on other people to fight your battles. He talks about the fatal flaw of using mercenaries and auxiliaries. He says that the arms with which a prince defends his state are either his own, or they are mercenaries, auxiliaries, or mist. Mercenaries and auxiliaries are useless and dangerous. If one holds his state based on these arms, he will stand neither firm nor safe, because they are disunited, ambitious, and without discipline. They are valiant before friends, but completely cowardly before enemies. They have no other attraction or reason for keeping the field than a trifle of stipend, which is not sufficient to make them willing to die for you. Think about your own career right now. Are you relying on the goodwill of a mentor, the empty promises of a boss, or the favor of a recruiter? Those are your mercenaries. When the economy shifts, or when the company does layoffs, their loyalty vanishes instantly. He explicitly says that he who is the cause of another becoming powerful is ruined. Machiavelli explicitly concludes that no principality is secure without having its own forces. It is entirely dependent on good fortune, not having the valor which in adversity would defend it. You have to build your own forces. You have to become so undeniably skilled, so deeply connected, and so operationally lethal that you do not need anyone else's permission to survive. Look at how he describes Cesare Borgia. who he holds up as the absolute gold standard for an operator. Borgia knew that relying on the arms of others was a death sentence. When his mercenary commanders became a threat, he lured them to a fake reconciliation meeting in Senigallia and had them strangled. He created his own forces, relying solely on his own men, because he understood that the arms of others either fall from your back, or they weigh you down, or they bind you fast. He also completely understood the psychology of leverage. When he conquered the Romagna, it was a lawless, chaotic mess. He appointed Ramiro Dorco, a swift and cruel man, to pacify the region with absolute force. But once the region was pacified, Borgia knew the people deeply hated Ramiro. So, what did the ultimate operator do to align incentives? He had Ramiro executed and left his body on the piazza with a bloody knife at his side. The barbarity of this spectacle caused the people to be at once satisfied and dismayed. He used another man to do the dirty work, then used that same man's death to buy the loyalty and fear of the public. That is not playing nice. That is architecting reality to serve your exact goals. We see this exact same operator mindset in the life of Castruccio Castracani, another legend Machiavelli wrote about. Castruccio started from nothing, adopted by a priest, but he realized early on that he was an operator, not a spectator. He hated incompetence and lived by the strict rule that men ought to attempt everything and fear nothing. He literally said that God is a lover of strong men, because one always sees that the weak are chastised by the strong. He didn't just fight his enemies, he out-strategized them using pure leverage. At the Battle of Serravalle, he knew he was completely outnumbered by the Florentines, 30,000 to 12,000. Instead of complaining about the unfairness of the numbers, he seized a fortified pass in the middle of the night, forcing the Florentines into a bottleneck where their cavalry was completely useless. He used the physical terrain as ultimate leverage to slaughter an army nearly 3 times his size. He won because he dictated the terms of the engagement, not because he hoped for a fair fight. Machiavelli also addresses the concept of luck, or what he calls fortune, which losers love to blame. People love to blame bad luck for their failures. He says that fortune is the arbiter of one half of our actions, but that she still leaves us to direct the other half. He compares fortune to one of those raging rivers, which when in flood overflows the plains, sweeping away trees and buildings. Everything flies before it without being able to withstand it. But he says that does not mean men should not make provision, both with defenses and barriers, when the weather is fair, so that when the waters rise, their force is neither so unrestrained nor so dangerous. If you are relying on luck, you are a spectator. An operator builds dams, digs canals, and creates leverage so that when the storm hits, he is entirely protected. He also says you must constantly adapt to the times. He whose actions do not accord with the times will not be successful. And he advises that it is always better to be adventurous than cautious, because fortune is a woman, and she is always a lover of young men, because they are less cautious, more violent, and with more audacity command her. You have to be bold, you have to be aggressive, and you have to take what is yours. If you sit around waiting for fairness, you are going to be waiting until you are dead. This brings us right back to reality, bridging the gap between a 16th century Italian diplomat and what you are doing tomorrow morning. Let me use my own business NexYear as the ultimate operator reality check. Our entire model is built on securing access to high-level VIPs, the absolute hardest people to reach on the planet. If I operated like an average person, I would just send an email. I would type out a nice, polite message, hit send, and hope the CEO is having a good day and feels incredibly charitable. That is complete slave mentality. That is relying on fortune and the fleeting goodwill of a total stranger. At NexYear, we do not hope. We deploy high-end custom physical assets directly to the target. We bypass the inbox entirely. We put a meticulously crafted, undeniably valuable physical object directly on their desk. We do this because it triggers a psychological and professional incentive for the client to open the door. We do not ask for a favor. We engineer a scenario where the value is so remarkably high and the execution is so flawless that it is illogical for them to ignore us. We deal entirely in leverage. We make them want to talk to us for their own operational benefit, and that is the universal sovereign standard. A king protects his kingdom by living in reality. I do not care if you are an entry-level employee, a college athlete, or a mid-level manager trying to break into the C-suite. If your strategy for getting what you want in life relies on someone else doing you a favor, you are a slave to their mood. You are an unarmed prophet, waiting to be violently destroyed. If you want a promotion, You do not go to your boss and cry about how hard you worked or how many extra hours you put in. You go to your boss when you are the absolute single point of failure for their most important project. You go when you have an offer from a competitor for 30% more money in your pocket. You go when you have absolute leverage. If you want to start a business, you do not complain that investors will not give you a chance. You build a product that prints money, and suddenly, every investor on earth is begging you to take their capital. You stop asking for permission. You stop hoping people will magically be nice to you. You start aligning incentives so that helping you becomes the most selfish, beneficial thing the other person can possibly do. Where in your life are you relying on hope right now? Look at your goals. Look at your daily actions. Are you hoping someone randomly notices you? Are you hoping someone magically picks you? Because if you are playing a massive losing game. You are completely ignoring the brutal reality of human nature, and you are going to get crushed by someone who actually understands how the board is set up. This is the bottom line. The world is a harsh, wildly transactional place. It does not care about your potential, your fragile feelings, or your naive concept of fairness. It only respects actual leverage. Stop getting mad at the world for not being fair, and start playing the actual game. Build your skills, build your undeniable network, and build your assets. Stop complaining. Stop being a spectator. Be an operator, build your leverage, and take your crown. I will see you guys next time.